What's up, guys? We're gonna get going in just a minute. All right. I say we get this show on the road, don't you think? Let me make sure everything's up and running correctly. Looks like it. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Got a little distracted by my monitor. Hope you guys are having a good Sunday. It is December 12th. Um, I forget what was going on last week. I couldn't stream. Oh, I was in Tampa last week. That's what it was. Uh, yeah, I don't know if I gave you guys a heads up about that. Apologies in advance for that. But yeah, I went down to Tampa last weekend. So I was driving back up to Atlanta on Sunday. And that is why I could not stream. Let's see. But yeah, I'm back on a normal schedule. I think the holidays should stop interrupting with my flow of streams. But another big announcement that I have, I am officially engaged. I proposed to my girlfriend 2 days ago, December 10th. We've been dating for a little over 2 years now. Never thought I would be getting engaged, be getting married, but here I am. I found the girl. And Bumble, of all places, seems very fitting for me to find the girl that I proposed to online. I'm not surprised there at all. But yeah, guys, if you're out there looking for that special somebody, don't sleep on the dating apps. Don't do that. And if you guys are like, dude, I need help getting a girl, I want to get married, I want to get my life going, one great way to do that, one great way that will drastically change your value, not just to women, but to men as well, get in shape. It changes your life 100%. It's not only going to help you if you're on Tinder, if you're on Bumble, whatever dating app you're on, but it's just going to help you in life in general. Job interviews. If you come in and you look like you work out, you look like you take care of yourself, that is going to have a positive impact. Not only are they going to, at like a subconscious level, have a positive image of you, but let's say you're missing a certain skill set. Let's say you're applying for a web development job and you have some experience with JavaScript, whatever, but you haven't quite messed with React and you're applying for a React job, that can be used to your advantage. Like, don't discount that. Don't discount building the habit of working out and its effects on other areas of your life, because you can use that. If they're like, well, we're just a little concerned. We looked at your resume, like you've got a lot of work experience that's valuable, but you just haven't worked with React and we're just worried about how you'll be able to handle picking it up. You can use that to your advantage. I think this is something a lot of people don't understand is they think like, oh, I have to sell myself. Sorry, just trying to move this cable. Like if I'm trying to sell myself, everything I bring to the table has to be like a GitHub repo or an actual project that's out on the web somewhere. Like it doesn't have to be like that. You can literally bring other experiences into it. You can, I mean, if you've made like huge gains, you can be like, look, I've had to do this before. Not necessarily with programming. I mean, you can bring those examples up as well, but you can also say like, hey man, when COVID hit, like I had a lot more time on my hands. I realized that health was important. I'd heard about how COVID can really impact people who are overweight, who are obese, and I realized I need to get my health in check. And you can like pull up an old picture. That used to be me. This is what I look like now. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I stuck with it. I built the habit. I've gotten results. I can do that. Trust me, I can learn React. Like, do not discount that. Literally bring that to the table. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. I didn't plan on talking about this today, but I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make in job interviews. Whenever people are asking you, like, why should we hire you? Yeah, it's a programming job, but literally bring any other life experience that sells you, that allows them to see, like, oh, you went from point A and got to point B and did all this work to get there. Because if you have the discipline to show up to the gym, to get in shape, to work out 3, 4, however many times a week you're doing it, that level of discipline, they're going to be like, okay, well, if he can do that, then surely he can read through some React documentations and build a few projects, especially if you already have a solid technical foundation or you have other projects you've made. It's like, okay, it's one other language. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, what if the interviewer just doesn't care about? What if they dismiss that or they're like, that has nothing to do with programming? Now you're interviewing them. Now you know the way that they're thinking. Now you can say, okay, if everything that you think that determines a good developer has to deal with code, then I don't want to work for you. Because any good company I've worked at, they always took that other experience into consideration. When I worked as a data analyst, where you're literally just writing SQL queries, and we had this language called SAS that we were using, they weren't just like, okay, have you written SQL before? Do you know how to query a database? If you were a collegiate athlete, that mattered because they're like, okay, you became a collegiate athlete. You probably had this insane schedule. Not only did you have to practice, you had to like lift weights, you had to stay strong, stay in shape, and balance all of your schoolwork. If that means nothing to them, really consider whether or not you want to work with that company. Don't write that off as like, oh my God, this is a failure on me. Like I brought up this bit of information. They don't find it valuable. So I messed up and I shouldn't do this in the future. No, that can be a knock on the company. You have to interview companies as well. That's one of the biggest things that people fuck up on. When I was interviewing at startups, I literally, whenever I'm like sitting down, I know the interview's coming up and I'm trying to come up with some of the questions that I'm going to ask the company at the end of the interview, because that's something that a lot of people struggle with. They're like, I don't know what to ask. If you want a little tip here on how to come up with questions for a company that you're interviewing for, and this will single handedly set you apart from everybody else that's interviewing there. Pretend somebody just gave you $10,000 or $100,000, just a big amount of money that you wouldn't casually spend. Pretend you have that money, that $10,000, and pretend you actually have to invest it into the company. What would you want to know? Pretend that you actually have to give them that $10,000 and that you're trying to make a successful investment. The very first time I did this, when I was working at a startup, I generated the best questions I've ever come up with because it just put me in a completely different mindset. I'm starting to think about their competitors. I'm trying to think about different industries they can operate in. I'm trying to think about why they chose the industry they already chose, like why that one as opposed to these other 10 industries. Those questions got conversations going on in that interview that I know they typically didn't have. And it showed a level of interest, a level of thinking that they never saw before. And they told me this afterwards. After they gave me the job offer, they were like, hey, by the way, we were really interested, or we were really impressed by your questions because most people don't ask questions like that. It's typically just like bullshit. Like, is there anything I've said today that makes you think I'm not qualified? Or, they'll just come up with questions they probably heard a million times. You have to make your questions stand out from everybody else. Now, sometimes that can go bad, and it's a dumb question where you're like, how long's my lunch break? I'm like, what, really? But if you're smart about it and you're actually coming up with really good questions, they will remember that. And that will single handedly put you way above everybody else. Because it's one thing, especially if it's a smaller company, it's one thing to have a good technical foundation. It's good to convince them that you can do what needs to be done. But if you are a developer and a business person coming on board, changes everything. Changes everything. And like I mentioned, don't take a negative or weird response from them as a sign that you've done something wrong. Because a lot of businesses give dumb answers, or you're being interviewed by an idiot within the company. So if they get like super weird, or they're like, well, we're just writing code, I don't think working out has anything to get out. You're not going to like it there because they're just so one dimensional. You need people that are able to say, oh, you're a rock climber, you've been doing this for 10 years? Okay, tell us about, like, what have you learned from that? How do you think that helps you in other areas of your life? If they're open to that kind of thinking, even if they don't believe it, but they're willing to throw the question out there, that's a completely type of person and a completely type of business and culture that you're dealing with. That's a very good sign. Like, hey, this might be somewhere that I can work at and work at for a long time, as opposed to people that are just like, well, you don't have TypeScript on your resume and we use TypeScript, so I don't know if this is a good fit. Fucking run from those people. I think at some point I should just do like a whole interviewing tips video or something, because I think I've learned a lot over the past few years, and there are just a lot of mistakes I see people making. And sometimes I don't really blame them, because it's kind of like that stuff. They're like, oh, what does that have to do with a software development job? But it's like, no, it has to do a lot with it. So if that's something that would be of interest to you, let me know in the comments. All right. So, one thing I wanted to talk about today before I went on that big ol' rant, there's an interesting trend I've noticed over, I guess, the past few months, maybe even the past year. that I think is actually really, really cool. And that is the increase in subtitles. And I'm talking from like an American point of view here. The increase in subtitles. Because if you're an American, like subtitles are pretty much non existent unless you manually turn them on your TV when you're watching a movie or something like that. You don't really see subtitles too often, which is very different to a country like Korea. If you go to Korea or if you watch any Korean TV shows, especially Korean variety shows, everything's subtitled. So it's a completely different, I don't know what you would call it, a perception of subtitles, whatever. But I've noticed, especially on social media, especially Instagram and TikTok, subtitles are more prevalent than ever. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, one, I actually like it. And I didn't even realize truly why I liked it until the other day. I forget what I was doing. I might have been in Starbucks, some public setting. I don't know. But, you know, sometimes you want to be on your phone. But if you are an aware individual who is considerate of the people around you, you don't just sit there and scroll through Instagram or Twitter or watch YouTube videos with your volume on full blast. I know it's crazy, but some people do that. But sometimes it kind of sucks because you have your volume all the way down or you have it very quiet, and then you're looking through these reels and you're like, oh, like this is actually interesting. I want to watch it, but I don't want to annoy everybody around me with the volume. But with the addition of subtitles, with subtitles being more common, there's actually a lot of content that really doesn't need audio. Sometimes it does. The audio is kind of like memeing to whatever you're watching, and they go together very well. But sometimes the subtitles add all the context you need to get the video. I actually like this. It's actually really nice to every once in a while just be able to like scroll through your phone, watch reels, watch TikToks, and not need audio to actually consume the content just because there are subtitles on the screen. Now, what's driving this is obviously technology. The technology to create subtitles has gotten significantly better. It's pretty mind-blowing, honestly. Like, I've done a few Instagram reels, and they have this little closed captioning option that adds like an effect on your reel, and it auto subtitles everything. And it's like 99% accurate the times that I've used it. So it took a while for the technology to get to the point to where something like this is easy to do. This is an unnecessary, how do I want to say this? This is just kind of like a stage in human progress that's going to kind of exist sometimes. Because if you think about the people that are like very big pro-government, very big regulation, very big on accommodating every marginalized group that exists, they would have been the ones that said, hey, we need to regulate closed captions from the start. Because there are people out there who are deaf, there are people out there who have impaired hearing, whatever it is. And they would say, oh, think about all these people that we're leaving out. Think about how all this content's being made that they can't consume because we don't have closed captioning. So their course of action would be, let's regulate this. Let's make it mandatory in the interest of helping to serve this minority within our population. Let's regulate this. Now, you can come at this from a purely altruistic point of view. You see a group of people that are deaf, a group of people that are hearing impaired, and you're like, oh my God, what about them? Maybe you even have a family member, and you kind of feel bad. You know, you're like watching all this content, you're watching YouTube videos, there's no captions, you're like, they don't get to enjoy this. Like, you actually might come to this conclusion from an altruistic point of view. But what if we look back on this and we say, okay, like when was TV invented? What date? Not when it was actually invented. So let's say like the 40s and 50s, people had TVs in their household. We'll go even earlier. We'll say 40. That's what, 80 years of captions not kind of being everywhere? 80 years is a long time. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a short amount of time. Now imagine what would have happened if we actually regulated this. If we actually said, you need to have closed captioning on any content that you produce. Otherwise, you pay a fine. Otherwise, you're breaking some law, whatever. Think about what would happen to our world. Imagine every person who has a podcast. Imagine every person who has a YouTube channel. Imagine every person who creates any sort of content whatsoever. Think about the amount of time that they would have to spend to add subtitles to their content. That's a lot of work. That would be a lot of work even if you were doing a 1-minute video. Those people that are a team of one themselves making YouTube videos, if that was actually a requirement, that content just probably wouldn't be made, right? It just wouldn't be made. The big company, that's why regulation always helps these bigger companies, is because if you said, okay, any sort of broadcast video content needs to have subtitles if there's audio on it, if you're ESPN, you're like, okay, we'll hire somebody to do that. No big deal. If you're Apple, yeah, that's cool. I don't know. Do we have enough money to afford this? Oh, is that our giant pile of $3 trillion? Yeah, I think we can afford that. But if you're a YouTuber who works a day job at Starbucks and you're just like, dude, I'm fucking done working at Starbucks. Like, I need to figure some shit out. You start doing like tech reviews on YouTube. Imagine getting slammed. Hey, this excludes a marginalized group. You need to add subtitles to this. That person's probably like, dude, do you realize I just spent 3, 4, 5 hours filming that video because I suck and I have to do retakes of every single clip 10 times because I forget what I was going to say. So they spend 5 hours recording, they spend another 5 hours editing, and now you're going to tell them, oh, in addition to that, you have to also transcribe every single thing you said, which would take forever. And that's assuming that's all you did, that you didn't like procrastinate. You're not like, let me check Instagram, let me check Reddit. You didn't procrastinate. You have to transcribe everything you said, and you have to add that onto your video. If you've never edited videos, let me tell you, it's a bitch. I hate doing it. I mean, I kind of in a weird way like it now just because I've created videos enough. I'm like, dude, the end product's going to be dope. Like, yeah. But, man, it is not a fun job. Editing videos sucks. And then to have to create a little banner every couple of seconds, the text changes. You have to keep re-adding another fucking box with new text. You would kill small businesses. You would kill small content creators. That is one of the greatest parts about our world today, is that anybody can create content. It wasn't that long ago where the only people who were on the airwaves were big companies in TV, big companies or local companies on radio, and that was pretty much it. Now you can have somebody in your hometown create a YouTube channel, and they might be getting more views than every radio station in your town. That's not that crazy to think about. Imagine crippling that person because they don't have subtitles. This is why we need to be forward thinking. I get it. If you're coming at it from a purely emotional point of view, you're just like, oh my God, these people are left out. But look where we've gotten. This is now available to everybody. They don't charge for this. Instagram isn't like, I mean, technically they could do that, right? Oh, you want automatic closed captioning on your videos? Okay, yeah, we're going to ask for $5 a month or something like that. Technically, they could do that. And it is costing them money at some level because when you hit that button, it takes a second for the captions to get generated. There's probably some API they're sending that audio to. That audio sending text back. Adds it, like, that costs money to make. And we get it for free. But this is how things happen sometimes. Does anybody honestly think the world would be in a better place if in 1940 or 1950 or even in the 90s we regulated that? The second the internet came out, the second YouTube came out, if we were like, if you don't have captions on your videos, you're not allowed to make videos. How many people would have taken that on? There are people that are too scared to stream. It's too much work to stream. And aside from the initial setup, it's not that crazy. You set up your mic, set up your camera, and then you hit start streaming. There are people that, I see this on Reddit, I see this on YouTube comments, where they're like, I want to start streaming, but I just can't bring myself to it. Or they're like, I still got to look up the gear. I still got to look up the perfect OBS settings. You know, they have all this shit that's getting in their way. Imagine adding something as big as captioning to your videos. So I'm not going to say I like dwelled in this phase of humanity where these people were just left out. But now it's getting to the point to where subtitles are pretty much ubiquitous. The cost of adding them is so low. You just click a button. And honestly, I would imagine it helps your engagement because there are some people that use them in very creative ways. You know, they'll just have like a little, it's like a headline on their video. How I lost 120 pounds. People click that. They're like, ooh, click that. And then text is just playing over it. We have to be forward thinking about this stuff because you can just completely slow the growth of technology with very well-meaning legislation. That's the thing. I'm not ignorant or just at a loss of words as to why these people cared about it. I get it. But you have to take a lot of things into consideration before you just legislate across the board and say, in the name of people who can't hear well, or in the name of people who are deaf, we're going to regulate this across the board. It's insane. It would have slowed progress. It would have helped big business. It would have completely eliminated this. I'm using business loosely here, but it would have completely destroyed small creators. This is why we have to be patient sometimes. Sometimes we want to do this stuff. I don't think anybody is like irritated by the prevalence of subtitles nowadays, right? Is anybody like on TikTok, on Instagram, just like seething with rage? Like, God damn it, all these subtitles. Probably not. It just took for our technology to catch up to where it was easy to do. Because that's a big ask for somebody. I know some of these people might not think that, but it is a giant ask. Say, hey, I know this is like a little side project for you. You're doing it in your spare time, but do you mind doing a couple more hours of work so that the non-existent segment of your audience has subtitles. But now that it's easy to do, now that it's a click of a button, is anybody like, nah, I'm not going to do that? Of course they are. I see people doing it all the time. It just took time to get there. And honestly, we're probably not going to be that much farther from people kind of getting called out. They post a picture or they post a video, they don't add subtitles, and their audience will be like, hey, by the way, there's just this little effect. You can add subtitles. It takes like 5 seconds to do. Do you mind doing it? It would really help out a certain segment of your audience. I'm sure they'll be like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Unless they're just really that concerned on aesthetics. They're like, I can't have anything covering my ass in front of the camera. It just takes time for that to get there. And I think we're finally there. And it's a great thing to see. All right, one last thing I want to cover. I was thinking about this the other day. Me and my girlfriend have been rewatching the Harry Potter movies. It's Christmas time. She hasn't seen them all, so we've been rewatching them. And every once in a while, I try to think, what is the modern day version of slavery? And I don't mean literal slavery. I don't mean like, what is the slavery that exists today that's as morally reprehensible as slavery? What exists today that we're going to look back and be like, oh my God. But what are some things that exist today that everybody just kind of accepts that 10, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, how did we just live with that? How did we think that was okay? I always try to think of some of those things. And I think child actors are one of them. I think one day we're going to look back on the Harry Potter film series and think, what in the hell were we doing? Any child actor in movies. I think we're going to look back and think, why did we allow that to happen? Now, why do I think this? Well, one, it's kind of one of the big inconsistencies with child labor. If somebody told you, hey, did you see that 10-year-old working at Starbucks down the street? They'd be like, what? Starbucks has a 10-year-old? Yeah, he's a barista. He made me my cappuccino this morning. They'd be like, what the fuck? How do they let a 10-year-old work at Starbucks? But if a 10-year-old is Hermione, we're like, hey, good for them. They're making a ton of money. That's awesome. The second a lot of money is on the table, all of a sudden, child labor isn't really that big of a deal, right? So we have this one weird exception where we don't object to child labor. Any other context, we would think it's so messed up. We'd be like, how is that company getting away with this? But if that child's in a movie, A-okay. We have no problems with that. I think we're going to look back at this one day and think, what happened? How did nobody question this? Now, if it's a one-off movie, I think we'll be a little bit more forgiving there. But specifically Harry Potter. They started that movie. I was in 6th grade, I think, when the first movie came out. So I was like 11, 12. And then I think when the very last movie came out, I was out of college. So I was like 22, 23. That's a 10, 11-year period that these kids were fully dedicated to the Harry Potter movies. That's a lot of time, man. And it's kind of a magical thing. I'm going to get canceled one day because I just said that. But it is kind of crazy that from movie 1 to movie 8, they had the exact same kids through that whole time. Yeah, there are a lot of regulations behind child acting. But if those same regulations were in place at McDonald's, would people be just as lenient? Because like on a film set, I think you're only allowed to work so many hours. Like you can't do like a 12-hour day if you're a kid. But let's say they're only allowed to do 4 hours. We wouldn't allow that at McDonald's. We wouldn't be like, oh, well, they only have to work 4 hours. That's the max they're allowed to work. We'd be like, no, they're flipping burgers. Fuck that. Get them out of there. But the second they're a child actor, totally okay. So yeah, there definitely are regulations. I'm fully aware of that. But we still allow them to work. The other issue here, one, I think the longevity of Harry Potter is going to be an issue in the future, but also the amount of kids that get completely fucked up by this stuff. It feels like a coin flip, doesn't it? Drew Barrymore, I think it was Drew Barrymore, maybe Cameron Diaz, doing fucking coke at like 9 years old. She's in like clubs, drugs everywhere. I mean, it's kind of an exception. If a kid's in a movie early on in their life, and then you're like, they grew up totally fine, totally drug-free, no issues whatsoever. You're like, wow, good for them. They made it. Like, they made it through that whole process, and they're not a fuck-up. They weren't addicted to meth. They didn't almost commit suicide 3 or 4 times. Like, it's kind of the exception. So we live in this world where there are multiple kids who got into this system with their parents' consent, and they didn't have the greatest life. Macaulay Culkin looks like he's 70. The Olsen twins look like they weigh 70 pounds. And they also look like they're 70. Like, if you're a betting man, you're not like, you know what? I think they'll come out all right. We haven't heard any bad stuff from Harry Potter, thankfully. But who knows? Who knows what went on behind the scenes? Who knows what's going on right now? Or who knows what's already happened and we just haven't heard about it yet? In 5-10 years, maybe fucking Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson come out. They're like, yep, I was on oxys the whole time. I seem like I was okay, but I was actually addicted to painkillers when I was 14 years old. That could happen. And that's like one of the most celebrated movie series of my generation. It's one of the very few movie series ever that I can think of that one went on that long, that had that many movies. How many other 8 movie series are there? Don't count like James Bond. That doesn't count. But like Lord of the Rings was 4 movies, right? Or was it just 3 long-ass ones? I don't know. But there's not a whole lot. And then you have Harry Potter, 8 movies over a decade long. Nothing but kids. That's going to be something that's talked about in a few decades. I am so sure of it. Especially now, when we have CGI, they're going to be like, did you really need kids? You couldn't just use CGI? Suspend reality for a little bit? Like, yeah, it's not perfect. But you look at, like, the CGI in video games, like the cutscenes, they look amazing. They'd be like, oh, but you actually had to hire an 11-year-old because you couldn't do an 11-year-old CGI. Those are the kinds of arguments that we're going to hear. And 40, 50-year-old me is going to be like, all right, kids, let's watch our Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. It's Christmas time. They're going to be like, fuck you. That shit ruined those kids. How dare you? You saw every movie in theater, you piece of shit. At no point were you thinking, what is this doing to these kids? How many drugs are they on? You were totally okay with this. You were good with them not working at McDonald's. You were good with them not working in a warehouse. You were good with them not working on Amazon. But as long as they were making millions of dollars, even though they're not fully autonomous yet, we don't allow them to make many decisions on their own. But when it comes to their livelihood in an industry with an age group that has a track record of completely fucking kids up, you guys were like, well, as long as it's a good movie. That's happening. That is 100% going to happen. And the fact that people are like, I don't think so, man. That everybody is like, that seems a bit extreme. wasn't slavery the same way? This is what I talk about when I'm like, what are the modern day versions of slavery? What are the modern day things that exist in our life that we're going to look back on and be like, wow? Because sometimes you'll ask people, like, what is your most controversial opinion? What is like your most unpopular opinion? And they'll just say some like basic bullshit, like trans fats are bad. It's like, wow, deep thinker here. No, I'm talking shit like this. Like, you got to say something where everybody's like, I don't think so. And not to pick on you, Mitch, I'm not picking on you, but where people are like, well, there's regulations. There could have been regulations in slavery. Like, oh, you can't just kill them. Like, you can whip them, but you can't kill them. You know, I don't know if that was the thing. I'm just like reaching to illustrate the point. But things like that. And another one, which I'll get into maybe next week, or I might even do like a whole video on it. Pets. That's another one. The fact that I own 2 cats, they're both downstairs somewhere, and the fact that nearly everybody I know has a pet, at least a dog, a cat, I'm not going to be surprised if in the future that is another one. And that's going to be the real mindfuck, because nobody views that negatively today. Unless you just abuse your pets, nobody's like, man, they got 5. Like, ooh. Or nobody just looks at, even animal rights people. People will be 100% vegan. They don't touch any animal product whatsoever, but then they have a cat. It's like, something's not lining up here, right? But I think in the future, it's going to be every pet. They're just going to be like, they didn't consent to that. We should let animals be free. Okay, PETA, the organization maybe, but people are even sympathetic of PETA. But honestly, fuck what PETA has to say, because they kill animals, so they're pointless. So let's use animal rights instead. There are people who are huge animal rights activists, or huge into vegetarianism, veganism, animal rights, animal welfare, that will own pets. They're going to be the most mocked in the future. Normies like me, who are just like, yeah, I don't go to a zoo. I feel bad about animals in zoos, but I still have pets. They'll be a little bit more lenient on me. But the animal rights people in the future, they're going to get it the worst. But I really do believe that is a future that we have in store for us. That it's going to be way more likely. Actually, owning a pet is going to be a bad thing in the future. And I think it's going to get so bad. I'm really reaching here. But I think it wouldn't surprise me if all these like emotional support licenses that people have, if one day that is the excuse to have a pet. Where everybody's like, oh, no, like, our kid's not autistic, but he's just more comfortable with pets, so we have a support animal. Like, that's their excuse for having a pet, because it's so frowned upon that people are going to have these little things in their lives. They're going to be like, oh, no, our kid needs it for emotional support. Or they're just going to come up with problems so that they can have an animal. But I'm pretty sure in the future, it's going to be nowhere near what it is today with people owning pets. That just seems like the logical trajectory. But even though I think that, I don't give a shit. I still got 2 cats. That's just the time we're living in. But yeah, if you have any thoughts, leave a comment below. If there's a modern day slavery similar to mine, and it has to actually be something where if you go on the street, people are going to disagree with you. Like, at least 8 or 9 out of 10 people. Don't give me some bullshit like, plastic's bad for you. Like, whoa. None of that basic shit. If you're going to leave a comment, give me like a literal version of modern day slavery where you go out on the street, you ask 10 people, like, hey, in the future, do you think it's going to be weird to have a pet? And they're like, no. I want something like that, where they literally just can't wrap their head around it. Leave a comment below. That's all I have for today, guys. I haven't gone to the gym yet, so I need to go get my leg day in before my dinner tonight. Like I said, leave a comment below with your modern day version of slavery if you have one. If you don't have one, just comment on mine. Tell me how dumb you think mine are. The child labor one in movies, as well as owning pets in general in the future. But yeah, that's all I have for today. I will be back next Sunday, December 19th. Nothing in my schedule to get in the way. But yeah, like the video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you aren't subscribed already. And let me just spam my bodyweight basics book here real quick. If you're trying to get in shape, January 1st is coming up. If you got your New Year's resolution, get in shape. And I can help you. And if you have any questions, find me on Twitter, find me on Instagram, find me on YouTube, send me a DM, whatever. I will do what I can to help you out, assuming you're not like, hey, dude, do you mind, like, writing up a whole workout program? Like, don't ask me to do a ton of work for you. But if you're just, like, have a few questions here and there, more than happy to help you out. Like I said, that's all I have for you guys today. Have a good Sunday. Hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. And I will see you next week. See ya. And thank you for stopping by, Mitch. Appreciate the insight. Appreciate the comments. Later.